Welcome to the Temple Mount.
This is the closest the Jews can come without going up to the Temple Mount.
Right. That's super important because they found the red heifer. Actually brought it from Texas all the way. So this is on the one side. This is the mosque of the Muslims. You're not really allowed to go in, but you can take a peek. So that is where the Romans used to watch over the Temple Mount in the old days, 2,000 years ago.
This is where Paul would have been brought. The Muslims ruled Jerusalem for the longest time. More than Christian, more than Jews. So all the way from 1187 to the First World War.
Yeah.
But there was not always the same Muslims. It started with some Ayyubis, and then it turned into those people, the Mamluks and the Ottomans.
The Mamluks originated from Egypt. They were slaves in Egypt, and the slave became a king.
The Muslims have full control here. I think the Jews are now trying to build the third temple right in that space over there. This is where the old temple used to be. This was the Holy of Holies, but it was stretched that way.
But now you have the Muslims themselves taking dust from Temple Mount and throwing it away outside. So the Israelis, archaeologists, who noticed it, they started to go and pick the dust and take it somewhere else, and then they started to go over it and like look through the dust, and they started to find things from different times.
They call this the dung gate. This is the
Southern.
south, right? The south side. We're about to go to the Temple Mount. If you go in here, the right side you go to the Temple Mount, the left side you go to the Western Wall. But you can see it's heavily protected here. Let's go.
Yeah, they have some aerial photos of how it looks like, and also how it used to look like with the temple. You can see the model of the temple. The only thing is this was the other way.
Right, turned around.
Yeah, it's the model.
Okay.
It's the same model as we saw in the Israeli Museum.
Okay.
Just a bit more detailed and colorful.
And there's a top-down angle here.
Yeah, and this is where they think it was. So you see also the lines where they think the temple was.
Yeah.
Sort of the other way. You have to turn it.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Between 48 and 67, this is Jordan, right? So it means that all of the old city, including the Western Wall, including the Temple Mount, is under Jordan. So Jordan is managing everything, and Israelis, Jews were basically not allowed to enter anyway.
Wow.
So they made the rules.
Yeah.
And then happened the 6 Days War, 67. And Israel took Jerusalem and took the Temple Mount, but it wasn't planned, it was a surprise.
Yeah.
Because Israel actually thought we were going to lose the war.
Right.
And the victory was a huge surprise. So suddenly we have the Temple Mount after
Right.
2,000 years, and we didn't really know what to do with it.
Yeah.
So after a few days, they were a bit in shock. They actually decided, because there's still, a billion Muslims around the world.
Right.
So they decided to actually bring it back to the Jordanian custody.
Okay.
So the way it works is that Israel is in charge of security, but the Jordanian king is the custodian. And the Jordanian Waqf, the ones who are responsible for the Muslim holy sites, they're the ones who make the rules.
Okay.
So about what you are allowed to wear and so on.
Yeah.
About the worship, there is sort of an ongoing negotiation. Officially, it's only Muslim worship. At the moment, the Jews are allowed to pray a little bit on the side, so it's always changing a little bit.
Right.
But basically, the main worship is Muslim, and all the rest are not really allowed to do.
Okay.
So that's basically the rules.
And this is the Western Wall?
Yes, this is the Western Wall. We'll be there later today. But sure, you can see from here.
Good angle.
Yeah. The wall is actually the structure of the floor of the temple area.
Right.
This is the closest the Jews can come without going up to the Temple Mount.
Right.
Also because they're not allowed, and also because they don't believe they are allowed because of purity.
Right.
So especially these types of ultra-Orthodox, even if they're allowed, they are not going.
Okay.
Okay, there are some who are going, and then you
Yeah.
just go around it, but some are not going at all, because they say we're not pure enough. You have to wait for the red heifer and the
Right.
ashes become
Yeah.
pure, and only then we can go. Even if the temple is not there, the place is
Right.
still holy.
Yeah.
They're praying as close as possible.
And that's super important because they found the red heifer. Actually brought it from Texas all the way. And so they already have the preparation slowly.
They
But
have several ones, yes.
yeah, so they have what they need. they're starting to prepare everything, but it will be like World War III right now if they do build it, because the Muslims will not allow it, because this is where Muhammad also ascended. So it's a little bit of a conflict.
Okay.
Good morning.
Morning.
This is the Israeli police territory. Okay. You can see it's heavy security here.
This is the Waqf territory.
So welcome. We are on the Temple Mount.
Don't really have problems with Christian tourists who are coming.
Yeah.
The heavy security is mostly for Israeli religious Jews who are sometimes coming, and then they will just go with them
Right.
along the tour, and they will also protect them, and they will also protect from them that they're not doing anything illegal.
Ah.
So this is on the one side, this is the Mosque of the Muslims. You're not really allowed to go in, but you can take a peek. But you see the other side is where the old temple is, or was.
First of all, a reminder of the main thing that happened here, right? Begins with the story of Abraham, right? We talked about that already. God tells Abraham to bring Isaac, his son, and he's coming here, and he's about to sacrifice him, and they all believe that it happened on that rock. Okay? Or the Jews believe. The Muslims actually believe that he took his other son, Ishmael, to Mecca.
Right.
It's the same story, different son, different place.
Okay. Yeah.
But the Jewish story is here. It's about the rock, and that's the biblical story. And later, this will become the place of the temple that Solomon will build, right? So the first temple. The Jews have also other traditions that are not biblical, like they believe that the rock under the dome is where the world was started to be created, and this is where Adam was created, and some other traditions.
Yeah.
But in terms of the Bible, we have Abraham, we have Solomon, who built the first temple, which gets destroyed, and then we have 7 years later the second temple that starts here and gets bigger and bigger until the time of Herod, where it is really huge. And then Herod also flattens the mountain. So you have to imagine under the dome you have the natural rock, but from there you have to imagine the mountain goes down like that,
Right.
which means everything here is artificial. Right? We saw the western wall, we also saw the south wall, there's an eastern wall, so it's something like that, and you build the walls around it, and then you flatten the mountain.
Yeah.
So here you have the natural rock, and here the other building is actually standing on the air, basically, on
Okay.
the artificial part.
Right.
So this is much more stable than this one,
Yeah.
right?
Okay.
So the floor, all the floor is Herod. That's 2,000 years ago.
Yeah.
They renovated it and changed some of it, but the structure of the floor is 2,000 years ago. Okay. Now, after the destruction, we have the Muslims who are coming here. First Christians, then Muslims. The Christians leave it empty.
Right.
And the Muslims come here much later in the 7th century. They conquered Jerusalem in 638 AD.
Yeah.
They conquered Jerusalem, and they bring them with them a different story about the same rock. Okay.
Ah.
It's based, first of all, on one verse in the Quran, which is very short and very not really meaningful. It says, "Blessed him, Allah, who took his prophet Muhammad during the night from the holy mosque to the faraway mosque, which in Arabic is Al-Aqsa, which means the far away. Okay, from the holy mosque to the faraway mosque. That's what it says in the Quran.
Yes.
Jerusalem famously is not mentioned in the Quran at all. But it doesn't matter because the Muslims also have interpretations for the Quran called Hadith. And these are the interpretations and elaborations of the Quran. The Jews have the same thing with the Bible.
Okay.
The Muslims have it with the Quran. And in that story, Muhammad is in Mecca, in Saudi Arabia, in his tent. And the angel Gabriel, he comes and he wakes him up at the night. And he takes him out and he finds some kind of animal called El Buak, which means the lightning,
Mm-hmm.
which has a body of a horse and a face of a man and wings of an eagle and some other elements, sort of a mixture of animals.
Yeah.
And he goes on his back and he flies from the Holy Mosque to the faraway mosque that later they decided is here in Jerusalem. Some of them still think it's not here, some of them still think it's in Mecca.
Yeah.
Or even a
Ah.
heavenly something spiritual thing. But at some point, at least most of the Muslims, or at least half of them, started to say this is the faraway mosque, Al-Aqsa,
Oh.
and this is the rock. So he comes here and he prays here, and he goes to the rock, and from the rock he's ascended to heaven, and he goes through the 7 heavens, sort of. In every stage he meets a prophet. Okay, for example, first one is Adam. Who do you think is the second one? Actually, Jesus.
What?
Yeah,
Isa.
Jesus is a Muslim prophet for them. He's not godly or anything like that, but for them he's a prophet. So he meets him and actually John the Baptist together,
Okay.
and some others, Enoch and Moses, eventually Abraham. Okay, and when Abraham sends him to meet Allah, he doesn't see Allah himself, but the angel again.
Yeah.
And then he gets a commandment to pray 50 times a day.
Oof.
And towards Mecca, before they were praying to Jerusalem, actually.
Mm.
So he says, you have to pray, every Muslim have to pray 50 times a day towards Mecca. He goes back to meet Abraham. But you remember once before, in the Bible, Abraham negotiated with God. And he took him down from 50 to 5,
Right.
about the righteous people in Sodom, right?
Yes.
Yes.
So it's actually basically a very similar story, only about the amount of prayers.
Yeah.
Abraham sends him to negotiate with Allah, because he says 50 is too much, people will not do it. Eventually they reach 5.
Mm.
Okay, so they reach 5, say, okay, we'll pray 5 times a day. They come back down here, and then they go back to Mecca.
Okay.
That's the story.
Mm.
That's the Muslim story. And that's why later in the 7th century and 8th century, like sort of in between, they build 2 buildings here. One which is the dome, okay, which is in the same shape. All right, it's a different. The outside was renovated over the years, but it's the same shape. Okay, and I said before, this is actually a Byzantine church, but it marks the holy thing underneath, which is the rock, same rock that the Jews believe that, they must not believe that, so it's the same rock is down there. And they also build a mosque around 705, something like that, maybe. A very big mosque, actually bigger than this. Remember, this is unstable ground,
Yeah.
Oh.
and it was ruined over the years with earthquakes.
Wow.
At some point, the destruction was so bad, they had to take the gold from the dome. This is not the original gold. This is like a cover from the 90s. The original was pure gold, the whole roof of the dome. They had to take the gold from the dome to renovate the mosque that was destroyed over the years in the earthquakes. So this changed over the years. The same shape is basically the same. Not the same shape from inside. I'll explain later from inside, but it just got smaller.
Yeah.
And the Muslims, remember, they pray 5 times a day. We talked about the story. They can pray wherever they want, and they have to face Mecca. It's better to pray in a mosque all the time, but if not, it's fine. You can pray everywhere. But then once a week, in Friday noon, they have the main prayer of the week. And then you have to go to the central mosque of the city, town, village, whatever. Everyone has a central one. In Jerusalem, this is the central mosque, Mosque of Al-Aqsa. So in Friday, actually, it's not allowed to anybody else to come here, just Muslims. And the Muslims will gather here with very big numbers. Before they were also Palestinians, but now basically Arabs who live now in Israel. And they will gather here every Friday. And first of all, you have to come in pure, to make yourself pure with the water. For the Jews, it's a mikveh. You go with all your body before you go to do something holy.
Right.
But for them, you have to put the water on your hands, on your feet, on your face.
Yeah.
And then you go to the mosque, you leave your shoes out. Also, again, there's something biblical about it, because Moses took out his shoes because it's holy ground.
Right.
By the way, Eastern Christians are doing the same, like Ethiopian Christians and Coptic Christians. They're also taking the shoes off before they go to churches.
Right. Welcome to the Temple Mount. This is where we are. This is where the old temple used to be. This was the Holy of Holies, but it was stretched that way. And then everything this way, if you look this way, that's the mosque, as you can see. But in the old days, there used to be nothing here because the mountain went down. So it's basically built artificially.
They used to have Muslims following them, like before, like let's say 20 years ago, following them and shouting Allah Akbar, Allah Akbar. But now they stopped it.
Okay.
Israel is much tougher now. Right?
That's good.
Yeah.
So this is where the temple used to be, and right across that way we have the Mount of Olives, which we all know Jesus is, when he's going to come again, he's going to stand with his feet on the Mount of Olives.
The rock is in the middle, and at least according to tradition and maybe also archaeology, remember the temple had the two rooms, right? It has the one which is holy and one which is the Holy of Holies.
Yeah.
So the first room, the holy room, is where the priest will go daily for the rituals. And the second room is the one that you only go once a year. The high priest only go once a year, and you have the veil between it. So they believe that the Holy of Holies was on top of the rock. So the dome is now protecting, it's like a shrine, it's not a mosque. It's a shrine for the rock, but the Jews believe this is where the Holy of Holies was. So the Holy of Holies was here, and then the Holy would be sort of a bit further away. Now, the building itself, as I said, it's like a Byzantine church, and it's remained the same shape. They changed over the years some of the stuff, like the tiles, they changed them on the 60s, and the gold was in the 90s. Before that, they tried to put some aluminium, it didn't look so well. Before that, it was actually black. You have different pictures for Jerusalem, and you see different colors of the dome, so it's quite interesting. Oh. So they tried all sorts of things, but eventually this is now the shape from the 90s. You can go online and see how it looks from inside. It's really nice. But now it's not allowed because of political reasons. They just want to show a little bit more force that they can, because if you can make the rules, it means you have ownership. So sometimes you just make more rules, so you own the place. You can make the rules. But actually, sometimes they I don't know, they wake up feeling nice and they'll let you in. So it's not that strict.
There's a lot of competition here between Jews, Muslims, but of course Christians. We await, of course, the second coming of Jesus. We believe that the Antichrist will come, maybe part in building the third temple as well. And then we believe that many will believe that he is the Messiah, including the Jews here, until he will reveal himself to be the Antichrist. So, if interpretation is correct, this is where it will happen. They will have a big problem if they want to recreate this whole area here as the third temple, because people from Islam will not allow it. But they might consider building the temple right there, because they are, I don't know if it's true 100%, but many think that maybe that was where it was.
So they think about like this area and where the people are standing around that. So that's sort of will be like the Holy of Holies of the temple, in that area, sort of. So that's if they're, I mean, it's an idea that they're floating and they're trying to promote. Yeah. We'll see, maybe it catches. It says about the Antichrist that he's supposed to bring peace for a while, so it makes sense it doesn't destroy and build on top. Yeah. If it's next, and by the way, the Jews are okay with it. Yeah. Like that's big. According to the Jewish rule, it's okay if Muslims are here praying at the same time. It doesn't matter. As long, I mean, if they can build next to it. Right. They have to build their temple in the place that God chose. Yeah. You're here, and then it's fine that Muslims are here as well. There's no problem with it. Okay. Even some of the Jews are promoting the idea, because it says in Isaiah that the temple, the house of God, will be a place of prayer for all the nations. Right. So they're actually even very enthusiastic about the idea of Muslims and Jews praying side by side. And Christians, maybe. Yeah. but some of them, of the Jews, religious Jews, like extreme sort of, they are really enthusiastic about that idea. That actually we should do it together. Yeah. So it's like the prophecy. It doesn't have to be a big building as well. I mean, I don't know if you noticed, we saw from the aerial map, in terms of the width of the building, it wasn't much. It was even smaller than this. Right. And there's a bit longer, but like shorter from the side. So it doesn't have to be that big.
But the third temple, for the measurements, it can be as high as they want to, right? There's no like limit on it.
There's only rules about the length and the width. But they say in the second temple, when they started to build it, sorry, I guess it's some. When they started to build the second temple, the people who saw the first one 7 years before, they came and they cried because it was such a poor building. Yeah. So you can make a very simple building as long as the measurements are right and all that. It doesn't have to be pure gold. It can just be like structurally very basic, as long as all the rules are followed. Then you can use it. Right. So that can be something like that. Okay. And then if it's allowed, you can make it nicer. But Herod did it nicer for his own glory, not for God's
Right.
glory.
Yes.
Yeah.
Remember the Islamic tradition about the end of the days, of they will be gathered in the Mount of Olives, in arches, like a bridge of 7 arches,
Right.
and they will lead you here, and here you will be judged.
Right.
That's
That's
Muslim,
what they believe.
the Muslim belief at the end of the day.
And if they fall down from it, that thin of like a hair, they'll fall basically into hell.
Yeah.
Right?
Iran Valley.
Yeah.
So down from here, we'll take a look at the Golden Gate.
The Eastern Wall.
In this case, it's both the city and the Temple Mount.
Okay.
The wall, same wall.
Right.
On the eastern side.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is one of the gates to the eastern wall, or actually the only gate. No, not the only one. There is another one, but the only one on the Temple Mount that was here. And the dating is a bit tricky. They're not sure exactly. They think it might have been late Roman, so Byzantine originally.
Yeah.
We saw in the model, it says that in the historical writings that there was also a gate in the eastern side during the Second Temple time, but they're not sure if it's exactly on top of it or maybe next, but it's the same area. On those days, it was called the Golden Gate. Okay, so it says in the historical records there was the Golden Gate in Jerusalem during the Second Temple time. So that's why the Christians give that name to that gate, Golden Gate. The Jews and the Muslims actually use a different name for that gate. They call it the Gate of Mercy.
Oh.
Probably because of the tradition about the end of the days and you're supposed to judge here, so they hope Allah will show mercy for you. But also the Jews, they use the Gates of Mercy. We don't call it the Golden Gate in Israel. But at some point it was sealed, probably when they would build the wall, probably around the same time. So it was open, for example, during the Crusaders, where they were here, it was open. And the Crusaders, they had some feasts regarding Jerusalem, like, for example, the Palm Sunday feast. So they would go down, same road we went from, more or less,
Yeah.
and then they would actually enter from here
Oh, okay.
during that feast. But that was during like 12th century.
Yeah.
When they built the wall, 16th century, they also blocked the gate, probably. Okay, so and then there's all types of legends about why they did it. Is it because of the Jewish Messiah who were supposed to enter, or is it because of the Christians who were using it? Who knows?
Yeah.
Today, the building itself is used as a mosque as well. So there's many mosques around this area. You see, look a little bit underneath the trees. You see there is a pile of dust, rubble.
Yes.
Okay, that's interesting. Why would you have that?
I don't know.
Okay.
Tell us.
So in that area of the Temple Mount, about 20 years ago maybe, the Muslims did a big renovation. They dig down and they sort of found an old building from the Crusaders' time and they turned it into a mosque as well. But when they were digging, it was sort of half illegal. They got permission to do something small and they did something much bigger.
Oh.
They took the dust and they threw it away.
Oh.
And this is something very important because you can't really do archaeology here because
Right.
of their holiness. They're not allowed to work here. But now you have the Muslims themselves taking dust from Temple Mount and throwing it away outside. So the Israelis archaeologists who noticed it, they started to go and pick the dust and take it somewhere else, and then they started to go over it and like look through the dust, and they started to find things from different times.
Wow.
All the way from the first temple time to
Wow.
the current time, to the modern days. Different stuff. The problem was that they didn't find it in place. They just find it in a sort of a dust that was just thrown away. So you don't really have the whole context, but still it gives you some information that otherwise you couldn't have.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now, the thing about the Palestinians specifically, or the Muslims, let's say, that until 1920, all the Muslims believed that this was the temple of the Jews here. Nobody had a problem with it because Quran speaks about it. It's obvious. But suddenly, when the Zionists came and the Jews started to speak about it, the Palestinians specifically promoted the idea that actually this was never existed. Actually, there was never a Jewish temple here. Maybe there was never existed. Maybe it was somewhere else in Jerusalem. But no, these are all lies of the Jews. So today, most of the Palestinian propaganda already from the 1920s promoted the idea that there was actually never. You want to stand in the shade, or?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay. So they promoted the idea that there was, first of all, there was never a Jewish temple here, and second, the Jews who are coming to visit, they're not just coming to visit, they're also plotting about destroying our mosques, our buildings. So Al-Aqsa might be in danger. This is already from the 1920s.
Wow. Okay.
Actually, the first riots, national riots between the Zionist Jews, or even Jews in general, and Palestinians specifically, who started to see themselves as Palestinians, started in the 20s, late 20s, because of that.
Wow.
So and when Hamas did their war, now they called it the floods of Al-Aqsa.
That makes sense.
So it's always Jerusalem. Even if the war is somewhere else in Gaza, it's always about Jerusalem at the end, and Al-Aqsa, and this place. So all the sort of tensions around, you can always trace it back to the one stone in the middle. All the rest is very solvable. When the Muslims heard that the Jews are going through the dirt, they started to say, well, let's keep it here, because we don't want them to find Jewish stuff in the dirt that prove that they were actually here.
So dishonest.
They used to believe that it's true, but suddenly they flipped it in the last 100 years that actually it never happened. And now we are going to also say that all their Jewish archaeology is fake, and we are going to prevent them from actually going over it, and we prefer to put it here on the mountain and not to let them go through it and find Jewish connection to the temple, which is obvious, but still, that's the sort of the lie of the last 100 years.
What? They can fit around 12 soccer fields here
Something like that.
on the Temple Mount.
I think so. If I remember correctly, it was something like that.
Yeah. The Temple Mount is actually huge. As you can see all around me, it's huge. And this is only one area.
The Muslims, there are some gates here that will exit one of them. There's like 3 or 4 gates here. The Muslims can come freely.
Wow.
Enter and exit from every gate except the one we took.
Okay.
But there are some gates here and some gates over there in the west. And they're coming and going freely. They can come whenever they want. It's never restricted for them.
It's so big here, there's actually schools here, Muslim schools. Look, right over there.
Yeah, and that's the Muslim quarter. So this is where they would enter mostly.
That's the Muslim quarter.
Yeah, on the other side.
So this is the Israeli part of the police. They're keeping a very, very strong eye on the Temple Mount.
Over there, this is where the Roman used to look at the Jews. So it was the same idea. It's sort of the Roman fortress, and now you have the Israeli police, and it's basically the same idea. It's another thing that Herod built.
Right.
So today, this is a school also.
Okay.
School.
So that is where the Romans used to watch over the Temple Mount in the old days, 2,000 years ago.
This is where Paul would have been brought when he tried to preach.
Okay.
So they brought him here. The Roman commander, don't remember the rank, but he intervened and he took Paul here, investigated him a little bit. Paul tried to speak again, and they brought him back. And from here, he was eventually sent to Caesarea. And from there to Rome.
Okay.
And
Where he died.
yes. But this is where he got caught, basically.
Yeah.
And brought to this fortress.
Okay.
And then he was led all the way.
So the trees are a little bit in the way, but you'll see it now.
When the Romans conquered Jerusalem from the Jews in 70 AD, they destroyed it completely. They actually conquered it first, and from here they conquered the Temple Mount, they destroyed the temple, and then they also destroyed that.
Yeah.
But here you can see, this is actually the natural mountain that in this case they carved down because it was too high.
Yeah.
So in this case they had to lower it, and in some places they put these walls as well. But yeah, basically on top of that would have been the fortress. So this is the basis to the fortress. I don't know if there is a specific stone I can point to, but this is basically the platform where it would sit on. I think there was something here. Let's see if I remember correctly. Here you can see the mountain, and some parts that are it was built. Okay, so yeah, basically it was here. I don't remember the exact rock that I can point to, but that's the place where it was built.
So tension was high back then as well. So you have the temple, and of course the Pharisees, Sadducees, and Israelites that would come here. But then the Romans, just to keep an eye out, just to make sure everything is safe, they couldn't, of course, just go into the temple and it's holy. So they build this right next to the temple to stand on top and also keep an eye out, making sure there's peace.
Actually, there were several times that were some riots.
Yeah.
And even before the big rebellion, there were like 5 or 6 times that the Romans actually had to go and fight against troubles.
Yeah.
Troubles here.
And you can see the distance if you look this way. That's where the temple was, and the direction of the temple back then was this way. So this is also where they would have taken Paul here at the fortress, right before they took him to Caesarea. I think the timeline there was around 2 years that he stayed there before he went to be judged in Rome. Why? Because he was saying that he is a Roman citizen, and so he took that route. You can even see the old rock still there underneath the walls. You can see it still there.
Yeah. Sometimes when the school is closed, they let tourists come and take a look from their window there. Those who don't go to the mountain itself.
Today, this is a Muslim school for boys.
Yeah, for the non-Muslims, there is only one entrance, the one we took in the morning. But you are allowed to exit from any other gate on the mountain. There are lots of gates, there's like 7 or 8 gates. But the moment you step out, you cannot come in. You have to go all the way around back to the main entry to the security check.
Right.
And only until noontime.
Yeah.
When it's closed.
So we're only allowed to come in one gate.
Yeah. The Muslims can come on that gate. University. Palestinian University.
Yeah.
This is the Muslim shop. This is a sort of style of building that was done in the 14th century. In 1187 until 1917, Jerusalem was under Islamic rule. Actually, if you count the years, the Muslim ruled Jerusalem for the longest time. More than Christian, more than Jews. So all the way from 1187 to the First World War.
Yeah.
But there was not always the same Muslims. It started with some Ayyubis, and then it turned into those people, the Mamluks and the Ottomans. The Mamluks were very interesting because they were brought to Egypt as slaves.
This comes from the Mamluk period. Mamluk period, this is a period they did a lot of huts. Huts are parking places along the road that leads from the area of the Jordan Rift. You have now the Jordan Rift Valley, all the way to Damascus and Mesopotamia. So the Mamluks built like places to stay overnight. And this was one of the places to stay overnight from back 700 years ago. The Mamluks originated from Egypt. They were slaves in Egypt, and a slave became a king.
The Mamluks were very interesting because they were brought to Egypt as slaves, non-Muslim slaves. Okay, and the idea is that they would serve as slaves, but it's not just simple slaves, it's also soldiers and ministers. And then at some point, they would become Muslim because under Islamic rule, you're not allowed to take a Muslim slave. You have to find someone who is not a Muslim.
Right.
You can use him as a slave, and then he would convert eventually, and then you would just bring someone else. But they brought them to Egypt in very big numbers from the area of Russia of today. But they became so powerful, so they took over Egypt. So the slaves became the rulers.
Yeah.
And they made a coup, and they actually conquered Jerusalem and controlled it for like 200 years.
Wow.
In the middle. And they built this type of buildings. If you go to Egypt, you'll see lots of that. Because this is what they're saying.
So we're here at the Lion's Gate, right over here, entering Jerusalem. Over there we have the Mount of Olives. So right here we see the Temple Mount, all the way up there. And then this side, it could have been the money changers, the people who sold all the animals for sacrifices as well. Of course, it could have been here, could have been in the area, but this is where it could have happened. And this is the side of the street.
Yeah, the shops would have been in both sides of the street.
Yeah.
So over there, it's also shops.
This is the area where Jesus could have taken out the whip as well. This is where we are right now. Fast forward 2,000 years later. The south wall. Right now we are here at the entrance gate at the old Jerusalem. So you can see it up there. They still have the ancient stairs there. The ones above is the ones that they built later, but those are the very steps that Jesus would have walked. He would come here, find a lot of trouble.
The threat, you have already defiled this temple by the greed and dishonesty which you have allowed, burdening our people and destroying their worship. I don't even recognize this place, and this is my father's house.
And then over there you have the Mount of Olives. So he would sometimes move to and from these areas as well, as you remember from the Bible, teaching of course the disciples, but of course we have Gethsemane, and he would cry, and my mind just sometimes when we walk around here, look at these places, go back to 2,000 years ago, and I can almost see in my mind's eye Jesus walking up here, the disciples, and of course the crucifixion as well. Very close here to the temple. And in the old days, of course, there's a lot of mikvahs here. It was very important for them to do rituals. And Aviel was just saying as well, the difference between Jesus and at that time, you could even be a murderer. If you go through the water, cleanse yourself, then you'll be fine to enter the temple. But Jesus was putting the focus on the inside.
You have steps here and you have steps there. And some of them are nice, some of them are broken. Especially the ones that are closer to us. The broken ones are the original ones. The main street would actually lead here where they're standing. So these are the original steps of those days, of the time of the Lord, actually the steps. And they would lead to the main entrance. The entrance was blocked over the years and changed, but basically where you see the arch there on the left, next to the wall, there would be two gates over there. Right? The arch is from a little bit later. And then where you see on the right side, you have 3 arches that are blocked.
Right.
You will have probably 2 doors as well. It will change over the years. But these are the 2 main entries. Maybe you would go from one and exit the other, and maybe not. But this was the main entry. They call it the Hulda gate. Hulda is one of the prophets. At the southern steps of Jerusalem, you have a picture there. And then you go up and exit where we are in the morning, actually, where we're sitting in the shade, you would exit. So this is the main entry to the temple. Probably most of the people, especially the pilgrims who are not from Jerusalem, would come from here. Okay. So it makes sense, which is where the Lord and his disciples went as well.
Sure.
The steps are the original steps, so that's why everybody wants to come here, because it's actually something very original you can touch and connect directly to that.
Join me and my team at DLM Christian Lifestyle on our tour of Israel in 2026, organized in cooperation with Emmanuel Tours. Beyond the Sea of Galilee, where Jesus calmed the storm. Walk on the same steps that Jesus walked to enter Jerusalem. Go in and to see the upper room and the Temple Mount. Imagine Capernaum, where he taught, healed, and lived. Or the Mount of Beatitudes, or as I call it, the Beautities, because it's so beautiful. And beyond, and also where Jesus will come again, where he will stand with his feet on the Mount of Olives. You can also walk through the stories of the Old Testament, from seeing Abraham's gate to the city of David. From the Dead Sea to Mount Hermon, the place where Joshua first came to conquer the land of Canaan at Tal Chatzor. This is ancient history, and you have the signs of the burn marks as well, because the Bible says that. What did Joshua do? He burned it to the ground. Not the other city-states around here, but this one, and the evidence is here. And then not only can you look at the Dead Sea Scrolls, but also where they found them at Qumran. There are just too many places to mention here, but we will also take you to see unique ancient places like Gilgal Rephaim, which was there before the Great Flood. Let me use this as an example because it's not easy to get to some of these places. Gilgal Rephaim, you can only get there with a Jeep. So you'll have a fun Jeep ride, and on the way we'll show you things that no other tour group will ever do. Actually, almost no tour group ever go to Gilgal Rephaim.
Oh!
What is that, Nikita?
It's mint!
I believe every Christian should go to Israel at least once, if you are able to go. I went with my father the first time in my early 20s, and I will never ever forget that trip because you never read the Bible the same again. This is a trip of a lifetime, and that is why I want to invite all of you to go with me and my team. DLM, we are starting Israel tours.